this week kicked off our first week of homeschool, and it was a little bit different than most years. I actually had a couple of our kids away at dance camp the first 3 weekdays of our school year, and then I also had my oldest working full time this year. So, when I was looking at our first month of the school year, I noticed there wasn't really any great times where we were going to have all 6 kids home at the same time. So we just decided to dive in. We were able to get quite a bit done this first week of school, though. We were able to help the 3 kids that were home to really adjust to their specific math programs and make sure that their things were set up for them the way that they needed to be so they can access them in the weeks to come. We were able to jump into learning about the rainforest, and we enjoyed the books The Rainforest Grew All Around this week, and If I Ran a Rainforest. These were a couple books that my preschooler really liked, and my 3rd grader also read them with us and enjoyed them. We began learning about the Mayans this week, and so we went ahead and watched the 2 episodes of the Mayans. That's a kids' animated history with Pippo, and then we read the book The Maya. We began learning about ecosystems. We learned about what a biome is, and we learned about ecological organization this week. We used this book, reading the introduction of the book, and then they spent some time looking at the pictures within this book. I encouraged them a little bit to come back to this book with their nature journals. We were also able to complete Beautiful Feats, World Geography and Ecology, Lesson 1 and 2, and it included a YouTube video that they needed to watch, and they watched that and they took some notes. My 3rd grader and my 5th grader were able to complete the lesson in Earth Science about the biosphere, which is lesson 11. We were able to get the first half of that lesson done, actually. We got all the way up through where it talks about food chains, and we plan on reading and learning about food chains next week. But my older son, who was in 7th grade, did his general science, Apology of General Science, and he was working through, I think it's module 13? I think it was module 13. For geography this week, we were able to start into This Beautiful Earth, which is South and Central America and Europe. That's by Charlotte Mason. We were able to review the first couple of lessons. They were review for us. They covered mountains and rivers. And then we moved on to lesson number 5 that begins into South America. So we did cover lesson 4 and then lesson 5. And so they talked about what an isthmus is, as well as some of the geography in South America itself. And we plan to move on to lesson number 6 next week. That's going to cover Venezuela and Colombia, and we're just going to try to do a lesson a day. For geography, we were watching a show called Travel with Kids that's on Amazon Prime. And in the episode that we were watching, the kids went to Costa Rica. My kids were excited about some of the recipes that the kids were making in the show. So we ended up looking up those recipes. And so we're going to go ahead and make some Costa Rican rice with chicken, arroz con pollo. And then we're also hoping to go ahead and make some fried sweet plantains. So anyways, we were inspired as we were going through our geography this week. We were able to do some art this week as well. We did The Fantastic Jungles of Henri Rousseau. We read this book about Henri, and we plan to continue to learn about him in the next 4 weeks. And then we completed an art workshop for children. It's a book by something like that. Harvey Toulouse. And we did the first workshop in this book. It's called The Field of Flowers. And it is a group art project where everyone has their own paper, and you get them all set up, and they start with a dot, but then they have to switch papers and add another dot that gets bigger and another dot, and then they have to add circles, and they keep passing their papers, and by the end they have basically a piece of art that everybody has created. My third grader, fifth grader, and seventh grader also completed a lesson that's done by No Sweat Nature Studies, which is with Miss Cindy. She had one that was specifically about rainforest, so they worked on that one of the days, and while they were able to work on that, I was able to do some preschool with my preschooler. Generally, I'm just finding times during the day where I can do a little bit of preschool with him in a couple of different sessions. A place that I really like to start with my preschoolers is learning about our community and community helpers, and I have a couple books that I like to read when we're learning about that. So this book is by Miranda Paul. It's called Whose Hands Are These? And it has a rhyming poem, and then it's a fun book because they can try to guess what the career is. So yank and crank, these hands are smeared. Reach and wrench, they've disappeared. When something breaks, these hands don't panic. These hands belong to, what do you think it is? It's a mechanic. Anyway, so my kids have always really enjoyed this book. This one's a little bit more difficult in terms of the careers it has in it. This one is a very similar book, but is a little bit easier. This one's the clothesline clues to jobs people do, and it has a poem as well, but the poem, the different careers it has are pretty straightforward. So this one's uniform and cap, an invite for you, big bag of letters. What job does she do? She's a mail carrier. Anyway, so those were a couple of fun books we read this week. I focused in on mail carriers. So we read the book, Can I Be Your Dog? Which has a dog who is asking all these different people in this neighborhood whether he can be their dog. He sends them a nice letter, and they send a response. And at the end, he's adopted by the mail carrier. And so that's kind of a fun book. And with that, we used the Lovevery game where it's called the syllable race. Basically, yeah, you're isolating sounds, and it is set up as a dog race. So you have 2 players, and they're in a race. Each player will turn a card, and then they have to isolate the number of syllables in each card. So monkey would be monkey. Anyway, so we played that game, and that's one of he really enjoys this game. So we played that with the Can I Be Your Dog epistolary book, and talked about letters, and talked about mail carriers. And we also read What Do People Do All Day? We've been working through this book slowly, but this week we read Mailing a Letter. Next week we're going to continue reading a few books about mail carriers that I have. To go along with our mail carrier theme this week, we have a couple of other books that we're going to be reading this coming week that we didn't get to this week. One of them is Seven Little Postmen, and then Sincerely Emerson. And then I have this, and it's just a printable that has all kinds of post office items that I've had for a few years now, and I've laminated a few things. Anyway, it's something that my kids, including my 5th grader and my 3rd grader, got involved in this week, enjoying some dramatic play with their little brother, so that was quite fun. We also read a book called A Little More Beautiful, which is a book by Sarah Mackenzie and is covered in Read Aloud Revival Premium, which is something that we do as a family as well. And so we were able to read this and talk about community helpers and kindness, We also read Miss Rumpius and A Sick Day for Amos McGee. And then along with that, we did The Good and the Beautiful's new finger painting. So we did the wildflowers lesson, and this is the example that they gave. And this was his completed wildflowers finger painting thing, and he thought that was pretty fun. Going along with that same idea, we read What's Inside a Flower, We Are the Gardeners by Joanna Gaines. And when we read this book, we talked about what living things need, and what's the difference between living and not living things. My older kids were learning about abiotic and biotic, so we were essentially learning the same thing on different levels. Then my preschooler also read the book Tops and Bottoms, and we learned about different kinds of vegetables. And then we also started going through the My Reference book about food, where we were talking about different kinds of fruits and vegetables. It's something that we just had on hand, and I had him sort out vegetables and fruits. We also have a scissor skills book that had a cutout of fruits and vegetables that he did. And then we went ahead and we've been working through the Paddington Treasury since we're learning about South America. And Paddington is from the deepest forest of Peru. We read the second story in this book that is Paddington in the Garden. And we also did a really fun little activity related to the first book where Paddington he has to take a bath and he ends up making a big mess in the bathtub. So I had my preschooler was able to play with some water that had bubbles, and I gave him some shaving cream, and he played with that outside on our picnic table and had a blast. And then I gave him a snack of marmalade toast. So that was just kind of a fun little preschool activity that he ended up really enjoying as well. This week, my preschooler was learning about the letter I. We did a bunch of activities that included the letter I, and we also really had some themes that ended up happening. This book, the letter I, includes inchworm and iguanas and an igloo and insects. And so we unknowingly to me, I didn't really plan this, but we ended up having an iguana we colored, and we had some insect stuff that I already had planned, and we had an inchworm thing. So it all just kind of came together, but this book had those things, and so that was kind of exciting to see. But we did learn about the letter I, and then we were focusing on a few different things. We've been working on, what's it called? Subitizing numbers. We've been working on measurement a little bit and counting to 100. So one of the things that we read the book 100 Hungry Ants, and we read Centipede's 100 Shoes. And so that was our practice of counting to 100. And then for measurement, we read the book Inch by Inch by Leo Leone. And in this book, the inchworm is measuring things. And eventually he escapes by scooting out of the pages of the book as he's measuring a nightingale's song. And a long time ago, when I think my oldest was little, I actually made a little inchworm. Basically, I just drew an inchworm, and I have it so that I can just I could just print copies of this, and then I just cut out a bunch of little inchworm, and then they can use these little inchworm to measure things. So one of his activities was measuring these puzzle pieces of insects. Good.
This is 2 inches.
Yeah. As we were working on our skill of subitizing numbers, we used these counting cups that are from Lovevery or Lovevery. We went ahead and used this in a couple of ways this week. It has a board that has a 10 frame, and it also has a different side that has a chart. And so he was able to watch, we actually watched a Sid the Science Kid about making charts. And so he created his own chart with this side. And then on the other side, it has the 10 frame. And this is where we practiced subitizing numbers he would pick an insect and he'd put it in front of him, and then he would put the number that he saw on there. My preschooler loves playing with Play-Doh, so this week we went ahead and refreshed his Play-Doh with our homemade Play-Doh, and so he helped me in making that as well this week. My teens were able to get quite a few things done before our school year began. They were able to get some of their math lessons complete, as well as a health lesson. My daughter was able to get a couple weeks of her French complete and some of her language arts complete before we started in, and they've also been working on their biology a little bit. Both of my kids have picked their own books. I had in mind some different books, but they each decided to pick a different book than I had originally chose, and I'm okay with that. My daughter decided that she wants to read Ray's Street Smart Teens, Christian Decision-Making System. So she's going to work through this in the next couple of weeks, and if she has time, she will go ahead and pick out another book or read the book that I was thinking would be a good book for her. We'll see. 11th grader picked out a book called The Preparation. That pretty much wraps up what we were able to get done this week in our homeschool. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch our video today. If you'd like, you can go ahead and like and subscribe to our channel, and we'll continue to try to put out some videos on a weekly basis. You guys have a great week.